The U.S. recently suspended its military aid to Ukraine, citing budget constraints and a shift in national priorities. This move has sparked intense debate, particularly among Kyiv and its allies. Dr. Smith, how significant is this suspension for Ukraine's defense strategy?
The suspension is quite significant. Ukraine has relied heavily on U.S. military aid to bolster its defenses against Russian aggression. For instance, the Javelin anti-tank weapons provided by the U.S. have been instrumental in deterring armored advances. Without such support, Ukraine's strategic position could be compromised.
There are concerns that this pause signals a wavering U.S. commitment. Could this decision be perceived as an opportunity for Russia to increase its military activities in Eastern Europe?
Absolutely, there's a risk of misinterpretation. Historically, when major powers like the U.S. shift their focus, adversaries might see it as a window of opportunity. Russia might interpret this as a reduction in U.S. engagement, potentially leading to a strategic recalibration of their approach in the region.
However, some argue that the U.S. could be using this suspension as leverage to encourage more European involvement. Could this be a strategic maneuver to balance global defense responsibilities?
That's a plausible perspective. By recalibrating its aid, the U.S. might be prompting NATO allies to step up their contributions. This could foster a more balanced security architecture in Europe, though it risks short-term instability if not managed carefully.
Following the U.S. decision, Russia labeled the suspension as a sign of U.S. unreliability. How does this rhetoric reflect Russia's strategic calculations?
Russia's rhetoric is a strategic move to exploit perceived weaknesses in Western unity. By portraying the U.S. as unreliable, Russia aims to undermine trust in American commitments, potentially fracturing alliances. This rhetoric is reminiscent of Cold War strategies where psychological tactics played a key role.
Given this, could Russia's narrative embolden its actions in regions like eastern Ukraine?
Indeed, it could. Increased rhetorical assertiveness often precedes more aggressive actions, as seen in past conflicts. Russia might intensify its hybrid warfare tactics, leveraging cyber attacks and disinformation to destabilize Ukraine further.
Yet, some experts argue that Russia also risks overplaying its hand. Could aggressive actions backfire, galvanizing international opposition?
That's a valid risk. Overaggression might rally European nations and reinvigorate NATO's resolve. History shows that while short-term gains are possible, they often lead to long-term strategic isolation, as seen with past sanctions impacting Russia's economy.
The suspension of aid has implications for NATO and European security. How might this impact the alliance's collective defense posture?
NATO might need to reassess its defense posture, particularly on its eastern flank. This could mean increased military exercises or the deployment of more permanent forces in Eastern Europe to deter Russian aggression. Historical precedents like the deployment of the NATO Enhanced Forward Presence illustrate this response pattern.
There's also the question of European autonomy. Could this situation accelerate efforts for a more independent European defense strategy?
Indeed, it might. The European Union has been discussing a more autonomous defense capability, and the U.S. aid suspension could act as a catalyst. However, achieving true autonomy requires significant investment and political will, which has been challenging in the past due to diverse national interests.
Conversely, could a push for autonomy weaken NATO's cohesion, as some critics suggest?
That's a potential downside. While autonomy could bolster European security, it risks duplicating efforts and resources, leading to inefficiencies. A careful balance is required to ensure enhanced capabilities don't come at the expense of alliance unity.
Looking ahead, what are some potential scenarios that could unfold from this development?
One scenario is increased diplomatic engagement between the U.S. and its allies to address budget constraints collaboratively. Another possibility is a pivot towards non-military support, such as cyber defense and intelligence sharing, to compensate for the pause in military aid. These strategies could evolve in parallel.
Lastly, what strategic adjustments might Ukraine consider in response to these uncertainties?
Ukraine might diversify its defense partnerships, seeking more robust ties with European nations and regional powers. Additionally, enhancing asymmetric warfare capabilities like cyber defense could provide a strategic edge in adapting to evolving threats.